Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on this episode of Equestrian Tea Time. In this episode, myself, Isabeau, and my co-host, Emma Jenkinson, we are going to discuss Emma's personal experience in an internship position at the famous/infamous Friesians of Majesty Friesians breeding farm in Vermont. I am going to read here at the beginning some details from a Vermont Digger article about, June of this past year, 2025, an additional 39 horses were seized from Friesians of Majesty. This is the fourth time that horses have been seized from the property. This time, 39 horses were seized. The first seizure of horses was in 2023. Dorset Equine Rescue, Gentle Giants, and a number of other organizations participated in the seizure and in the rehabilitation of the horses. The Dorset Equine Rescue, since the first seizure, has taken a total of 74 horses off of Friesians of Majesty's hands. What sparked our conversation today was that the latest seizures from this past spring, 39 of the 40 horses, their seizures were finalized, which allows the rescues that have been taking care of the horses to finally move forward with gelding the stallions, which is very important, and trying to rehome these horses. So trying to rehome the horses, get them into permanent homes, get them moved on so that the rescues can take in and take care of more horses. The article that I'm reading from is from vermontdigger.org. It was an article on June 19th of 2025 of this year. As I said, this has been an ongoing animal cruelty investigation for several years, including the Fish and Wildlife Department, Game Warden Service, Department of Public Safety, Animal Welfare Division, Vermont State Police, all involved, along with Gentle Giants and Dorset Equine Rescue, in seizing these horses from the Friesian Majesty Farm. So there are plenty of other articles online to look them up. I will leave a link in the show notes to this particular article from the Vermont Digger. And at the end, we have an invitation to anybody else who might have experience with Friesians of Majesty to reach out to us about being on the podcast. But for now, here's our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Now,
Cool.
this farm, you had the distinct pleasure of being employed at this lovely facility. When was that?
My goodness, that must have been maybe 2013.
And okay, when you went there, it was as an intern or as like a full-time employee?
They called it an internship. Some people actually paid to be there.
Wow.
I was getting paid, I think $300 a week.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't afford groceries on that. I didn't realize how expensive groceries were in Vermont versus, like, we drive an hour to a little store. It's way out in the boonies, whatever.
Oh, wow.
But just to begin with, I was not making enough money to just buy groceries. So I did not stay long. Notorious, I think he's still been advertising. I haven't seen in a few years, but he was looking for interns forever. There were 4 of us and a barn manager, and then someone who was an intern as well, but paid to be there, so she did not have as many chores.
Gotcha.
But at the time, there were 70 or more horses. There was a full barn with like 20 foals. I would work 12-hour days. We all got 1 day off a week.
Mm-hmm.
We would all take turns doing night check with a partner, sometimes alone. And I showed up, of course, in January. So I've never experienced winter like that.
Gotcha.
Knee-deep snow, -10. It's wet, so everything's freezing. Like the barn door would freeze closed, things like that. And so mostly all of that, just that was enough to get me to leave pretty quickly. I was there a few months. But also, one of the things I was promised in that internship was lessons, and I only rode a horse 2 times in the 2 months I was there.
Wow.
And just the management of the place was not like we hear of it now, but it was a little bit bad for a breeding farm. We had foals, fillies, colts, different herds of horses that all look exactly the same, by the way, because they're all black Friesians.
Yes.
70 of them. They're all, like, almost all of them were kept in electric fencing, and that's it. And so they would constantly be ripping through that and
Running loose all over the town.
all over the property,
Oh
and we're
boy.
trying
Yeah.
to separate horses that look exactly the same too and put them all back in their pens. So there was just a lot of that. And I don't know, we were just all exhausted. There were two trainers there, and they spent all day in the arena, and we would do chores at 6 a.m. and then all we did all day was tack up horses and bring them to the trainer and then bring them back down. And they had to put their barn with the arena on top of a hill, and so you would walk
Yeah.
like a mile down an ice hill. I'm not talking a hill, it was ice.
Yeah.
Like, I remember just trying to like skate up and down that hill with horses that were literally slipping in that. $70,000 horses. It was my fourth internship that didn't work out, where I was appalled, and but that one's notorious. Still nothing's being done, and he continues to keep getting these horses back.
Yeah.
Such a shame. And just, I used to groom those horses, and he was like, this is $100,000 stallion, and now they're at the draft horse rescue.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous, right? And
Were any of these client horses that belonged to other people, or these were all horses owned by the property owner?
they were all owned by the property owner.
Okay.
He's not a horse guy. Uh, he's a big businessman. He was
Hmm.
paving all the roads and owned like a quarry to pave all the roads from Massachusetts to New York.
Gotcha.
So he got a big, big payday, and then he sold his quarry and everything, and then he bought a little farm to retire at and to hobby farm. Basically, this breeding
Yeah.
farm was a hobby, and it has gotten way, 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 way out of hand.
Mhm.
And even 10 years ago, we couldn't keep staff. I left, of course, but I had two other people walk out just while I was there.
Yes.
So I can see how they lost all their staff, and this could happen because you've got that many horses, you need staff, and that means you have to treat them and pay them well. And even 10 years ago, that was not happening.
Sufficiently fed and stuff while you were there? I mean, you probably couldn't have laid eyes on all the horses on the property. You were probably only in
Oh,
one
I sure
section.
did.
Oh, you did?
I
Okay.
sure did, because they had us do a lot of work. We'd start at 5
Okay.
a.m. and end when the sun went down. So I would get up and do a loop of all the pastures and physically roll hay bales into those. And then I would go up to the barn and clean everything. And then I would go to the full barn and clean everything. And then I would start moving horses all day. And they would just,
Wow.
so I was probably more work than I've ever done, just because of the setup there and the ice and everything. But
Yeah. Yeah.
all the horses look great. All the foals, they were healthy. Everybody seemed healthy. Nobody even had like a health issue while I was there, except for a lot of rain rot we were battling. But the barn manager there was very good. She really cared. If nothing else, she just cared about the horses. If no one was there, she would still take care of them. Maybe a few years before I got there, an instructor was living in their new barn build. That was the full barn with the breeding stuff, and it actually caught on fire and burned that person. That person died in there.
Oh, wow. Oh,
The
shit.
barn burned down to the ground. The family tried to sue or something. We'll have to check up on that. But things like this have happened before, and like they all signed NDAs. No one was supposed to even tell me about that when I was there.
Wow.
I never mentioned it, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there has been any real incidents where people wanted to pursue legal action. He would have for sure gotten them, paid them off, and
Mm.
done something privately and told them to shut up, because nobody will speak on this. I have reached out to other interns I was there with, and nobody will even reply. so far.
Wow. This is the only place that I know of, horses have been repeatedly seized, and this person is still chugging along. They
Right.
had tours of people coming to view the horses. Where did you see any of those tours? Do you know anything about that?
I sure did, and
Okay.
also would come. I He did sleigh rides for one thing.
Oh, wow.
Multiple horses in a big old sleigh, and so actually one of the worst experiences I had there, because it put my life in danger, was he had me go out on a sleigh ride with some tourists,
Mhm.
and he usually has somebody like lead the horses. It's a big sleigh, it's a lot of horses, whatever. So I'm leading these horses through a pretty small path in the snow. But anyway, there's like streams under the snow, so you can't see them. So I just like let his horses go forward, and this giant sleigh, like that thing must have been like 1,000 pounds. So I'm lucky I jumped out of the way. I did, but I freaking fell in a stream in 10-degree weather. And the tourists were like, "Should we go back?" And he was like, "No." And we like finished the ride. We went to a field. We cantered around. By the time I got back, I was like shivering. Even he was like, "Go inside." I must have had like almost hypothermia. I couldn't get my boots off. They were frozen on. And when they had staff, it was a place. It just wasn't paying us or treating us okay. And that's
Yeah.
probably why there's no one there now to hold the ship down. Um, and I just also thought it was interesting that they kept mentioning the barn fire. Like when he gave me a tour, he mentioned he's like, "This is my new barn, but it's barn number 2 because we had a fire, but thankfully no horses died." Forgot to mention like someone burned alive upstairs.
Yeah.
Why even mention it then? Um,
Yeah.
it just all seems sketchy
I
to me.
actually
Heard about this incident when it started 3 years ago because a breeder I was working for knows one other gypsy vanner breeder in Vermont who they're also close knit. She was complaining about it and sent that to her.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's such a small community, it's such a small state. I'm so surprised that the legislation is like letting this go on. And like I said, horse owners there and breeders, because it's such an old practice. It's been passed down for generations to a lot of them. They have worked really hard to have a lot of welfare in place in Vermont for especially livestock. Like
Yeah.
that's why those horses could be seized. In New Mexico, of course, if you have that many horses, if any of them, even if they look like they're starving, if they can show like water and there's hay on the property, they can't do anything. And so Vermont's different, and I'm surprised they keep giving him his horses back.
Well, it's very difficult.
Maybe not
Just the
now.
United States, unless your animals kill somebody, or unless you're trying to raise livestock in an area where you're not legally allowed to, there are no legal mechanisms to stop people from breeding.
Yeah.
We don't have any type of framework for monitoring, and it probably comes back to the fact that we don't have any central registry of horses in the United States. There is no one place where the federal government knows how many horses there are, what they are, and where they are. We've all been very opposed to that, and we don't want it, and nobody wants to pay for it. Nobody wants to keep track of it. Um, it would be too hard to be a huge expensive thing to find all these horses, track them down, register them, keep track of what they're doing, and just be a ton of money that nobody wants to spend on all these people with their very expensive, fancy pets. What it reminds me a lot of is have you ever seen Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares?
Oh yeah, because my wife's a chef, so we're like
Yes.
obsessed.
So, I mean, the horse farms remind me a lot of that. Sometimes people are just well-intentioned, but the reality of running the business really smacks them upside the head, and they really get
And
knocked
it's a
knocked
tough
down.
business, right? The restaurant
Yes,
business and the horse business are
rest
rough,
business
but
tough. And sometimes these people are just jerks, and they would have been jerks no matter what they do. Sometimes they're
absolutely.
just passionate but blind, and sometimes they're just, I want to bring my grandmother made the best lasagna in the world, and all of my customers are telling me it sucks. How do I prove to them they're wrong? Okay, well, you don't.
right? Like if
But
they don't
yeah,
want it, then and not everybody wants horses, and it's a big deal to start breeding them. Um,
yes.
and what I wanted to ask you as a barn manager is like, what do you think the limit on an amount of horses to have on a farm is as an individual? Like I think
As an individual, huh? Yeah.
as an individual, in case your barn help quits or whatever, I would keep
Mhm,
my farm at a point where I can handle it. And I think what I've witnessed is the limit is like 20
mhm.
if you have a
It
tractor.
de- it depends a lot on the what the I want to say landscape. No, not landscape. The climate is. There are people who live in Texas and Arizona in places where one person with a tractor can take round bales out to all. You'll have like 2 to 6 horses in each area. They have a shed. They have water. You drop a round bale in it, and they will consider it a part-time job for somebody to spend 6 hours a day driving around, taking a look at all those animals, dropping around bales in the pens that need them, checking them for injuries, doctoring the ones that are injured. And they'll expect one person to do that for 100 horses. There's absolutely places like that. When you're talking about the Northeast with the weather, I mean, if you had a live out situation with sheds, it would still be very challenging to keep an eye on 20 horses, especially when you're talking about weather and the winter and stuff. The extremes of weather are really hard. I've seen people keep
Yeah.
horses in some really rough situations where they were thrown out, but they were in a large area, dozens, 56, a couple dozen acres. The animals can move from place to place. Like there's a place in the pasture where it's going to be cooler, when there's going to be less bugs. They're out in a group, and they can be pretty hardy in situations like that. But the smaller the property is, the more extreme the weather is, the less you're going to be able to do that. You can't get away with that. The smaller it is, and the more ice it. I mean, I've only got 6 animals in the barn that I'm in, and we've still got 2 part-time people who come to help me. And in the
Mhm.
winter, the farm owner pitches in. We would spend. I'm in New Hampshire. This past winter, we would have days where between him and me, we'd spend 6 hours a day plowing. And this is not a huge property. This is a 12 acre property. It is not big. But when we got serious snow, it would take me almost 3 hours just to do all of the driveway and the hard track. And then if we wanted to plow areas for the horses to go out, that would take us another couple hours. And that's not including doing stalls, getting the horses out, because, they're not going to get turned out in the fields until we've plowed a path here. So yeah, I mean, it can take a lot of people for a small amount of horses, depending upon the
The
climate.
setup and the
And
climate.
Vermont, yes, no, Vermont is going to be really rough, especially like you said, in the winter. I imagine the bugs in the summer are horrendous there.
I bet it's very humid. I don't know. I was there in the dead of winter, and even then,
Okay,
there was
yeah,
bugs, and it was very humid, which is
bugs in
a
the dead
little
of winter.
like when yeah, right, and because it was so cold that when it would get a little bit warm, it would just
Mm,
feel to all of us like so warm, right? And the bugs, we would still have some bugs, but yes, that place had 2 full-time stable hands, maintenance people who were just like throwing hay and fixing things. We had
yeah,
4 interns, a barn manager, the owner, and 2 trainers, and we were all still immensely struggling.
yeah,
I think we did lack tractors. Like uh we had a vehicle that did not go in reverse, that we would drive on the
one of
ice to
those.
bring, up into the field and on this ice, and so we would like literally slide it on purpose and do a loop so we could turn around and leave. Um and bring all the grain over or whatever. So things like that could have made things more functional if we had like enough equipment. But yeah,
Yes.
it is just almost impossible to keep any amount of horses on that like it was a lot of acres, and then it was going all the way up that hill to the barn.
Yes,
Which
yes.
was an
No,
ice hill.
I've seen some property on some horrendous hills, and it is really a big deal when you have to keep going up and down the side of a mountain.
It's
Exhausting.
difficult horses.
But then once the ground gets bad, once the footing is rough, it's really really challenging slash quite dangerous. And I mean, people don't think of this, of course, when this guy set out to build his dream facility, having no personal experience himself. He was not thinking about, well, what is it going to be like to walk a weanling down that hill in January?
Yes.
Probably not something that was going on. Brain. Yeah, no, the horse industry is definitely one of those things. And I'm pretty sure this is why so many people have farms in Texas and stuff, is because if you're going to have horses, you don't want to have 100 horses in the Northeast. You don't want to have them in Vermont, unless you can afford a staff of 20 full-time people,
Or if you
10
have that
gators.
small staff, you better pay them real well. They better be happy to be there. And I had like one other girl came in with me and actually left, I think the first week, and I ended up asking to leave. And I'll tell you the last little story of when I decided I had to go is I was taking a horse back and I was asked to get another horse, and there were two pens that were there was a gate between them, and they were
Mhm.
colts and fillies, okay? And then
Ah,
that gate was on like a hill, and so I was bringing a horse through that and holding the electric wire on one side, and I heard thundering hooves behind me, and I literally fell down the hill, rolled, and like ducked, and these horses jumped over me. All the horses in the other pasture, right? They all just came railing through, and some of them had gotten like one of them had gotten their leg on the gate, right, and freaked out and
oof.
all this, and I
Uh,
just anyway, I had like 12 horses all mixed together that weren't supposed to be, and I just was like, you know what? They're not loose. They're like in a adjacent pasture. So I limped my way back up to the barn, and they were just like, "Where's the horse I told you to get?" And I was like, well, this happened, and I got screamed at for letting these horses mix. And at that point, I was just like, I'm gonna get killed here. I'm gonna get run over. Nobody's watching me. Nobody would have come and got me or looked for me if I had been down out there. They weren't even, they were just like, "Hey, where have you been?" They were just like, "Well, now we have to go sort out these horses." And I'm like, yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't put a gate between those two pastures. When I asked to leave, he would not let me leave. He said, like, "Oh, well, I'm taking a trip next week there." He was pissed about me wanting to leave. So he kind of stopped talking to me. I was like communicating with his wife, and he wasn't like guaranteeing that he'd give me a ride. And I was to Boston, a few hours back to Boston, where he picked me up from to get on a plane. I ended up calling the other intern who left, and she lived nearby. So she came and got me and drove me to Boston. And then I had to hang out there and like stay on someone's couch. I found somebody who knew somebody in Boston with like 6 roommates. And so I was very lucky that like these random people got me out of there because I was gonna have to hitchhike in the snow. He was not gonna take me back to the
wow.
airport.
Yeah. Some of the riding I did as a young person was at a farm that had been not quite a breeding situation, but a hoarding situation. The lady had been really successful on a breed circuit at one point in her life, and her business kind of trickled out. And, she had stallions running around with mares in fields. Then eventually, everybody who knew her, once her show business dried up and she got to be older, and the horses were just still all out there breeding. Eventually, our 4-H leaders started sending us teenage kids over to her place to ride. Why don't you go over to Sally's place? And they picked out some of the horses that were broke, and we rode them, and then they rehome them, and they kind of slowly picked away at her collection of horses to try to make it disappear, because she was
That's very
getting
cool of you guys.
older. Yeah, well, I mean, it was good at the time because us kids got some horses to ride. I mean, I know they still wound up. She didn't want to give up the stallions. She didn't want to do that. There was some more. I wasn't involved in that at the time. I was 13 or
Yeah.
something. But at the end of the day, she just had been her whole life, and she didn't want to quit or shut down or stop. I lost track of her. I don't know how it wound up in the end. So, I mean, people might luck out like that, but this guy, obviously, in the episode here, I'll provide links to a couple. I found a couple of good newspaper reports that give a
Okay.
concise history of all. I think it looks like he's had horses seized 4 times.
Yep.
And he still thinks he didn't do anything wrong. And sometimes the judges have given some of the horses back to him. But yeah, I mean, like these folks
We'll
just,
have to count how many horses died between all those 4 seizures. And
yes,
this
we will
has been
have to
going
get
on
this track.
for 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Let's see. So the first seizure in July 2023, yes, 13 horses have been forfeited and rehomed. The second forfeiture request by the state after 20 horses were seized in September 2024 was still pending. The state also seized 2 horses from the farm in June 2024. The state filed 16 misdemeanor animal cruelty charges related to the status of the 20 horses. The most recent seizure, yes, 25 of the 39 horses wound up at Gentle Giants. But yeah, this has been, so yeah, I'll provide a link to this one article from the Vermont Digger, the VT Digger, News in Pursuit of Truth. I found a couple of good articles. There's a lack of resources for implementing the laws, which is basically true. I mean, who's going to take care of 20, 30, 40, 60, 70, 100 horses from somebody? It's a huge thing to do, unless you're either going to go in there and just shoot them all, which there is an argument to be had for doing that, because this just
Might be
otherwise it's just,
kinder at this point because
yes, yes,
a horse starving to death there couldn't be a worse fate. And
it's terrible. Yeah.
they get in that part of the country because of the weather. Like we were battling awful rain rot and things like that. So if they haven't been getting care, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it could be so
And it'll be
bad.
interesting to see how Mr. Friesians of Majesty, we'll have to try to figure out the article from 2024. One said there were still about 90 horses on the property. So if they took 40 something from the last seizure, that still leaves a large proportion of horses on there. It's interesting. Bex Nairn, the anatomist lady, does all the dissections on the horses. I didn't realize she started doing dissections because she was involved in post-track rehab with horses, and so many horses came lame that she eventually got curious. But she released some statements recently where she expounded on her experiences, and they were really one of the reasons why she left the rehab project that she was participating in, was because they were increasingly restricting what they would let people talk about and say in public. So you weren't allowed to talk about these horses having this problem, and you weren't allowed to talk about these horses having that problem. And apparently every year it got more and more restrictive. More and more rules would come down about what you weren't allowed to say. I imagine a lot of folks close to this situation also are in a situation where they can't talk, but doesn't
I
mean we
wouldn't be
can't
surprised.
look.
It doesn't
Doesn't
mean
mean
we
we
can't
can't
look
look.
or even ask.
Hello again. Thanks for joining us on our podcast. Emma has been wanting to talk about the Friesians of Majesty, her personal Friesians of Majesty story for a while now. Now that the latest court ruling came down, finalizing the most recent seizure of horses, we figured this was a good time to put it on the podcast. We would love to chat with anybody else who has had any other direct experience at Friesians of Majesty. When we started our podcast together, we were mostly envisioning that it was going to be talking about the difficulties and experiences of people who have worked directly in the horse in industry. So we would love to include some more of that in the future. So if you have a personal employee, employer, or working student story and you want to come and talk to us, that would be great. Especially if you have any personal stories about working for or at Friesians of Majesty. We would love to chat with you. You can reach out to us. There's contact information on the podcast website and in the show notes here. You could reach out to Emma Jenkinson at Emma Jenkinson Dressage, or to me, Isabeau Zarabas Salas. I am on Facebook. Thanks for joining us.